The bottle slipped from Sanan-san's hands and crashed into 1,000 tiny bits on the floor. A scarlet drop oozed down from the corner of his lip. Sanan-san crumpled to the floor. Sanan-san! I paused, uncertain. He groaned in agony and pulled his hand back to grip his chest over his heart. It's clear he was suffering. Hang in there! I'll go get someone right now! I took a step forward, about to place my hand gently on his back. His right arm whipped out almost too fast to see and threw me across the room. I slammed into the wall and slid to the floor. I could barely breathe. My vision went blurry for a moment. I coughed once and looked up. Just in time to see Sanan-san land on top of me, his hands already reaching for my throat. His right arm reached for my throat, and he relentlessly started to choke me. The hands around my throat were Sanan-san's, but the man behind them was someone else. His silver-white hair glistened in the dim light. His bright, maddening red eyes showing through his bangs. I knew those eyes. His eyes were the eyes of a predator, not a man. I saw eyes just like the night I arrived in Kyo. Those creatures in the alley, drenched in blood. Monsters. As he choked me, I desperately tried to keep breathing. No, this wasn't a monster. This was Sanan-san. He was still the man I knew. Son. Suddenly, the fingers around my neck loosened. Had he just let me go? I crumbled to the floor and I gasped for air through a throat still red with his handprint. My tearful eyes caught sight of Sanan-san, whose hair now shined white brightly.
失敗したようですね。私は意外と賭けに弱かったようで。
In the depth of those red eyes, there was a faint sign of reason. Sanan-san, are you back?
雪村君、頼みがあります。今のうちに私を殺してください。
What? His words weren't registering in my head, and I could do nothing but look into his eyes.
薬は失敗です。すでに私の意識はなくなりかけている。このままでは君を殺してしまうでしょう。
No! At this moment, memories of when I'd first arrived in Kyo and of the Ikeda incident flashed before me. I witnessed so many deaths in this time. I came to terms with the idea that for a member of the Shinsengumi, death is a constant. But never could I imagine taking someone's life. Most of all, Sanan-san's. No, I can't. I couldn't do that. I mean, you're still you, Sanan-san.
君という子はこんな が時だというのに。それでもやりなさいと言っているんです。
Sanan shouted at me and grabbed my collar. I could see his red eyes flickering. Sanan struggled with his remaining willpower to fend against the madness boiling inside of him.
やらなければ君が死ぬのです。この場にたまたま居合わせただけの君にそんな役割を申し付けて申し訳ないとは思いますが。
His right hand slid off my throat, and I felt it land on the hilt of my sword. What is he doing? As I stood there confused, Sanan-san's fingers wrapped around the handle and began to pull. Oh no. No! Too late, I realized what he meant to do, and I felt ice creep up my spine. Sanan-san! Please! You can't! I tried with all of my might to pry his arm away and prevent him from drawing my sword, but...
この薬の影響下にあっても心臓さえ止まれば死ねますから。
I can't.
殺してさい。
He spoke in starts and stops now, as tendrils of madness began to pull him under.
死ぬ。
My sword was now completely drawn, and he pointed it towards his breast over his heart. Sanan-san! Just as the white, shining tip of the blade was about to pierce his heart, Sanan-san screamed in anguish, dropping the sword he was gripping. Sanan-san! What just happened? When I ran towards him, Sanan-san collapsed to the floor. Sanan-san! Hang in there! Sanan-san! I ran over to him and rushed to check his pulse. He's still breathing. He only lost consciousness. This alone gave me a great feeling of relief, but suddenly the door behind me slid open. I rushed to look back when...
Sanan-san.
Okita. Sanan-san, he's... Okita had a cold expression.
どいてくれる?
His eyes narrowed, and I saw them flick around the room from Sanan-san's limp body to myself to the shattered veil. Vial, not veil. Okita's mouth tightened, and he bent down to lift Sanan-san off the floor.
あの薬を飲んだ直後って内臓を握りつぶされるぐらい苦しいらしいんだ。多分最初の衝撃に耐えかねて気を失っちゃったんだろうね。
After finding that it wasn't life-threatening, I felt a pang of relief.
でも本当の苦しみはこれからなんだけどね。三男さんにはまだ死んでもらうわけにはいかないから頑張ってもらわなきゃ。
His tone was surprisingly detached considering the circumstances, and Okita picked up Sanan-san before leaving the room. Once they left, I collapsed to the floor out of supreme exhaustion and slumped into myself. I finally tapped into the secrets of the Shinsengumi. For so long, it was kept from me, and now their forbidden secrets were revealed. My mind went blank due to confusion and fear, but I knew what I saw. After Sanan-san collapsed, the captains rushed into the room. They must have heard the commotion from the common room. Everything glowed white after, and I realized that I was in a daze. None of their words stuck in my ear, and I wobbled back to my room.
まったく手間がかかる子だよね、君って。
Okita had taken me back to my room, and I heard him as soon as he opened the door for me.
説明してくれるかな。どうして三男さんと一緒にいたの？
Okita was never particularly pleasant to me, but his tone was even harsher than usual. I felt like there was someone in the common room. I was curious, so I had a look. I found Sanan-san in there. Okita's lackadaisical response seemed disarming, and he just scanned me. Oh no. Although my mind had cleared somewhat, it was still difficult to keep my thoughts organized. One, however, rose quickly to the surface. Is it true that my father had something to do with that? That stuff that Sanan-san drank?
三男さんから聞いたの？それ。
Yes, he said it. Makes you stronger, but it drives you mad. He fixed his eyes wearily on the ceiling above us, sighing before eventually answering my question.
君は薬をここに持ち込んだ人の娘だし、狂った大使とも実際に会ってるし。少しぐらいなら聞かせてあげてもいいかな。本当なら殺しちゃいたいところだけど。
His manner of speaking was far removed than his usual joking self when he mentioned killing. But this time, it felt like he meant it. He could kill me at any time.
薬のことについて何か質問ある？一つくらいなら答えてあげるけど。
I desperately searched for the words. Why did the Shinsengumi get involved in something like this?
僕たちの役目は今日を騒がせる不逞労使を取り締まることだけど、簡単な仕事じゃないっていうことぐらい君にだってわかるよね。
Among the Ronin, there are plenty that are actually skilled swordsmen. When I was on rounds, I saw many such men fighting and dueling amongst themselves.
今日に来たばかりの頃は、とにかく人手が足りなくてね。僕たちの名前なんて全然知られてないし、給金だって満足に出なかったからさ。入隊希望者なんてめったにいないし、たまに来ても得体の知れないゴロつきばっかり。そんな時、幕府の人が薬の実験を持ちかけてきたんだ。
An experiment. That must have been what Sanan-san was referring to. So, you knew what the side effects were, and you still make them take it?
もちろん、彼らも承知の上だよ。新選組にはね、局中ハットっていうのがあるんだ。隊をまとめるための決まりみたいなものなんだけど、それに背くと即切腹を申し付けられる。
Cut yourself open?
あれ、何驚いてるの？武士の責任の取り方って言えば 切腹しかないじゃない。
Traditionally, when samurai disgraced themselves, they drove their swords into their bellies. I had thought such traditions were obsolete, and that now the worst they do is pretend to cut themselves open with a fan.
でもまあ、どうせ死んじゃうんだし、最後にもう一度役に立ってもらった方がいいでしょ。だから、切腹するか、薬を飲むか、好きな方を選んでもらうことにしたんだ。かわいそうだよね、本当に。
I couldn't think of anything to say. What sort of a choice was that? Death by your own hand or madness and death by someone else's? The men that I'd encountered that winter night had their last thoughts as men had been hoped they might survive the madness. It sounded horrible.
簡単に強くなれる薬があれば便利だよね。実際は全然大したことなかったんだけど、僕たちでも簡単に切っちゃえるぐらい。
In a moment, I was taken aback to that fateful night when Okita dispatched the warriors with white hair without any effort.
三男さんはこれからどうなるんだろうね。
I was worried too. Was Sanan-san okay? Would he change? My stomach was twisting itself into knots. And so the long night broke. I think we can skip this.
みんな安心してくれ。
Yep.